Great. So hopefully you can all see that. So morning everyone. So my name's James. I'm going to be talking about future-proofing your SEO strategy today. So just very briefly, for those of you who aren't familiar with Search Labs, so we're an integrated global digital marketing agency. We've got around 150 people split between offices in the UK and the US. And in practical terms, we drive profitable growth for our clients through digital marketing and data science activities. So just very briefly about me. So I lead the SEO function at Search Laboratory, part of Harvest Media Network. I've got about 12 years of experience now in operations management, delivery of SEO within an agency environment, and responsible for driving forward the SEO offering. So what you'll take away hopefully from my talk this morning. So we'll start off with a bit of insight into the changing organic search landscape and what that means for us within marketing. And then we'll talk a little bit about large learning models, a bit of 101 on that, so we can get an understanding of sort of what the systems are that we're dealing with. And then we'll get into some practical tips about what you can action right now to prepare for increasing AI influence within organic search. So we'll start with, as I say, a little bit of context around the current state of the organic landscape. So some good news to start with, that organic search is very much alive and well and remains a key growth and performance driver for brands, and actually still often undervalued channel in driving growth and performance for brands. And we know that's the case because even from these recent stats, we can see that 50% of website traffic is driven by organic search. 68% of all online experiences do still start on a search engine. But actually amongst our peers in marketing, 49% of those people believe that SEO is actually the most profitable channel. And I suppose historically, when people talk about SEO, most people's minds would go to Google, and they'd be right to do that, because 92% of the search engine market globally is dominated by Google. We can see that 3.5 billion searches a year are still performed on Google, and 84% of those people who are using Google search are using it more than 3 times a day. So Google is absolutely still a dominant force within organic search. However, we are starting to see consumer behavior change. So the bracket that comprises organic search is expanding, and it's undergoing a step change in response to that shift in consumer behavior. So actually, we can see that 50% of searches within organic actually don't lead to a click through to a website. The users are getting what they need within the search environment. We can see that video is starting to play a much bigger role within search. So YouTube is now the world's second biggest search engine with 2.1 billion users. We can see changing behaviors in younger generations. So Gen Z, actually 40% of them are now using social and prefer TikTok over Google to search and find answers that they need. And finally, within the sort of e-com sector, we can see that 63% of UK online shoppers are actually starting their search within Amazon over Google to find products that they want to buy. So by not kind of recognizing this shift in the bracket of organic search, we're potentially missing out a significant portion of our audience just by focusing purely on Google. So what does this mean for us in marketing? Well, it means that actually the way people are looking for and engaging with brands through organic has fundamentally changed. So they're utilizing much more of these, a wider variety of these touch points across different platforms in order to achieve their goals. That's not to say that the website and your website isn't a vital part of that journey. It's just that it's just a part of that process in consumers finding what they need. And this actually presents quite an exciting opportunity for us. So because consumer behavior has changed, but quite often brand strategy hasn't, that creates a disconnect. And within that space, there's opportunity for brands that are willing to move quicker. And it's not to say that, brands might not be engaging with this activity across social, YouTube, but these other platforms. It's just that they're not necessarily aligned in strategy. And we do see that there's quite often siloing that occurs between social teams, SEO teams, broader marketing teams. So that gap between approach and user behavior does create an opportunity for us within marketing. And it's not just in marketing that we've sort of recognized that. Actually, Google has also recognized this shift in behavior, and they're sort of completely overhauling the search engine result pages and starting to leverage generative AI and their large language model to meet those changing needs of a modern user. So on the right-hand side there, you can see an example of the search generative experience. So actually, that's a user who's performed a query, and I'll cover this in a little bit more detail, but they're receiving written guide content in response to their query in the chat function. They're using follow-up queries and actually also receiving some e-commerce results, all within one interaction within search. So this functionality is already in beta, and it's rolling out just 3 countries across the world, mostly in the US. So it's early days, but the rollout is going to start ramping up over the next year or so. So Google's likely to cease to be a gateway through to websites and actually exist as a single point to explore content, research products, and understand brands. So authority and trust is going to be absolutely critical for AI to select which content to surface, but the format is going to shift. So rather than long form informational content, Google wants us to focus on concise, snackable content delivery rather than that previous reliance on longer content. And actually, users might move through an entire buyer journey, even within a single interaction. But again, that creates an opportunity. So there's an opportunity for brands to engage within that search environment at each stage of that funnel. And UX has always been something that Google's really been pushing. And actually, the new creator-led card-based layout that you will see primarily on mobile, but also in desktop in time, is going to provide additional optimization opportunities to drive engagement within the SERPs, utilizing social, video, imagery, but targeted much more towards that user journey. So how do we set ourselves up to win? So before we get into all the tactics and some of the processes and approaches that we can take, we'll just take a step back and just get a bit of an understanding about large language models and the system that we're dealing with. So I'm by no means an expert in this area, but a large language model essentially takes a huge data set, which is often the internet, and uses that text to learn from. So then when you as a user perform a query, it then creates a probability distribution of what it thinks the most probable next set of words are in response to that query. So large language models don't understand language in the same way that we would. So really, they're not an AI in the truest sense of the word. There's actually not too much of a concern at the moment about them becoming sentient, but obviously, they're becoming very, very useful for a whole range of different applications. And there's a really brilliant guide on large language models that I have linked there just on the slide by Brittany Muller, which goes into lots more detail on this. So I'd highly recommend reading that. And large language models are the thing that underpins all of these different chat functions. So Bard, ChatGPT, other AI chat systems are all powered by this. So they're not search engines. So that's quite an important thing to note. So large language models don't go and retrieve information from a source. So they don't take the internet and go and find a piece of information in response to a query. They use that data set that they've got to learn what the most probable next set of words are in response to a query. Now, we can, however, hook up search engines into large language models using a process called retrieval augmented generation. So that connects external resources to that learning data set. So it allows large language models to access much more up-to-date information. So as I say, they can be connected to search engines and external resources, and the information that they can access is basically as fresh as how quickly search engines can get content into their index. So it could be within minutes, depending on how frequently search engines are crawling your website. So this is where actually SEO very much still has a part to play. So this is where we can influence that process with our optimization work. So we want to ensure that our content is being surfaced and being pushed into that learning data set that whichever large language model we're working with has access to. And then when our content is utilized to deliver a query, then often search engines will show citations within the results, and I'll show an example of that shortly. So yeah, we can have an influence on that process to make sure that our content is part of that data set. So what can we actually do, I suppose, to put ourselves in the best possible position to win in this constantly changing environment? So the good news is that actually a lot of these tactics are building on existing best practices for SEO. So it's not like we need to completely tear up the rule book. We don't need to start from scratch. So some of these activities you may be already doing in some form, and others might be opportunities to enhance or build into your existing strategy. So firstly, in a post-generative AI world, everyone's going to be battling for real estate within these citations or other rich features within results. So we essentially, as marketers, need to prove to search engines that we have the best, most informative, most useful content for their LLMs to learn from and surface. So the first task is to assess the content that's currently ranking the space that you're targeting and develop a strategy to essentially go further than everyone else within that space. So helpful content has been a massive focus for Google recently, and actually is now an automated ranking signal and is built into their algorithm. So if there's anything on the site that has been developed purely for SEO or isn't adding that much value to users, then it's worth removing that or redeveloping it, as it can potentially be hampering your overarching organic performance and potentially hold you back in the sort of post-generative AI environment. In contrast, if you've got any really solid content that's tucked away within blog archives or hidden from search engines that actually could provide a lot of value to users, then we need to make sure we're surfacing that and promoting it within the site structure, making sure that search engine crawlers and have got access to it. So it's, as I say, it's being pushed into that learning data set. EEAT, these set of guidelines that Google search team are using to determine quality of content, but I'm not going to say any more on that because I'm looking forward to Olivia's talk on this topic later. But yeah, it's just to say that EEAT is going to be a critical part of delivering content performance in the post-AI world. And a couple of other areas just on added value. So think about other ways you can add more weight to the content that you're delivering on site. So whether it's first-party insight, like research, reviews, expert insight from someone in-house, or through to case studies, anything that can help enhance the customer journey and basically encourage people to buy, whether it's product or service, anything that aids in customers in achieving their goals. A combination of all of those factors is going to put your content in the best possible position to be surfaced within citations, within the search generative environment. So just moving on. So we want to start optimizing for multiple stages of the journey. So as user journeys are becoming condensed into single interactions, we need to adjust our content approach to reflect that. So you can use existing features within the results, like people also ask, alongside there's other tools like also asked, which is really good, or SEMrush to find related informational queries around your target keyword. So start with a seed keyword and then look for related informational queries around that. And that will start to give you some insight into what search generative experience might surface as a follow-up query, which users can just click without actually having to type in. So that means you can then start to optimize for those queries, but all within a single piece of content. So we need to move away from these kind of long form pieces all focused around a single entity or topic and actually start to use page layout, design, structure of the content to break everything down into snackable segments, because we want to try and deliver the answer to those queries in the most concise, search engine friendly format possible. And then also through the structure of the site, we want to be internally linking through to products and services. So as I say, with that example on the right, this person's search for activities in Maui, an informational search. They've then gone on to view kids' backpacks because they're obviously planning a holiday. So they've received that e-commerce query, and then they've gone on to surfing lessons. So if you were a travel brand, you could conceivably deliver against all of those queries, even if you were linking through from an affiliate perspective to some e-commerce listings. So it's just about thinking about it. We want to try and think about how we can meet all of those interactions in the most concise and efficient way as possible. So moving on to multimodal strategy. So as I mentioned, video is becoming a lot more prevalent. So SERPs are becoming more visual, more multimodal. So it's going to be critical to align your content strategies across video platforms like YouTube, like TikTok, that are already starting to become a lot more prevalent within organic. And that's only going to increase. Google and Bing shift towards these more card-based layouts. And as I mentioned before, in some cases, we know that the marketing teams can exist in silos. So it might be that bridges need to be built between internal teams, but we can't sort of silo SEO and organic social and creative any longer if we want to sort of win in the post-SG world. So video content should support existing on-site content strategies. So that could be product guides, FAQs, instructional pieces. But again, it's important to think about that sort of snackable, concise delivery. So one thing you can do right now is think about optimizing chapters on YouTube. So actually, you can use the headings within chapters to optimize the content where relevant for informational queries. So you can see as an example on the right there where Ahrefs are doing this well, and that top result. So you can start to think about other, again, longer tail queries to optimize your content for, and actually, again, that could help with those follow-up queries within search generative experience. And we're starting to see Google really prioritize shorts. So obviously TikTok is very prevalent. YouTube shorts are becoming more popular as well. So they're already popping up frequently within the results. So wherever possible, think about breaking longer videos down into shorts or repurposing TikTok content to optimize for your organic queries where relevant, where it links back to existing sort of written content that you're posting on site. And within that, try to host and embed as much video content on site, again, where relevant. So search engines can easily see the link between these external third-party platforms and your on-site copy, and you'll be much more likely to see video content that you're posting being surfaced for more generic or informational queries. So it'll help you rank organically. And just a couple of final ones. So this is an example where we're seeing citations within search generative experience. So that's generally how we think it's going to look. Google are sort of developing this all the time, but you can see the 3 citations on the right-hand side there of examples where the content has been pulled into the learning data set and then surfaced within the chat function. So because there's images featured there, that's an opportunity for us to optimize. So any imagery on site will affect click-through rate. So we want to make sure that there's a really eye-catching image within the content that is then being pulled through into that citation box. So yeah, when we are posting content that we're trying to push towards these large language models, it's important to think about alt text, think about how eye-catching the imagery is on page, and then ideally you'll be able to see that within the results as and when this starts to roll out. And yeah, I just mentioned all that. And finally on schema. So actually, this is one of the few pieces of actual guidance that we've had from major search engines relating to AIs around schema. So for those that might not know, schema structured markup is code that you basically wrap around HTML elements within the code of the website to provide context to search engines about that specific piece of code. So examples would be product schema, which you can use on things like, so you can wrap it around things like the price, the item description, whether the item's in stock. There's other brand related features like the logo, address, phone number. And finally, there's certain semantic elements like FAQs, blog post titles. So Google actually recently scrapped surfacing FAQ rich features within search results, which were supported by schema markup. However, this is a hypothesis, but they still support FAQ schema within their guidelines. And it seems like a bit of a no-brainer that they would utilize schema on site to support the large language models and because it's all around informational queries. So schema helps search engines build a connected knowledge graph around your brand, which then builds relationships between your content and other sources of information across the web. So that inherently helps large language models to build this picture of how your content relates to everyone else's and should, in theory, help your content therefore be surfaced. So yeah, that was everything. So just to summarize everything we've discussed there, because I know we've covered a lot of ground, but user journeys are becoming a lot more fragmented and complex. So we need to respond to that with our strategy. AI in search it's very early days. You can go and access this within Bing, but it's not live on Google in the UK yet. But it's definitely here to stay and it's going to keep developing and changing. All those content signals that we talked about, from content freshness to EAT, helpfulness, multimodal, they're all critical for feeding LLMs. And finally, the actual piece of guidance we've had from Fabrice at Bing saying utilize schema as much as possible, markup as much, as many elements on site as you can to help LLMs build that knowledge graph around your brand. And that's everything from me. Thanks very much. Has anyone got any questions?
Really interesting talk, James. Thank you for that. I've actually had someone DM me a quick question for you here.
Yeah.
It's from Ben. He basically is asking, how would we define low value / unhelpful content? Which metrics should we be looking at?
Well, at a basic level, I suppose I'd start with looking at engagement metrics. So is it, are you getting any existing organic traffic to those pages? Have you got content that's got a really high bounce rate? Does that suggest that, people aren't sort of interacting with it and getting value from it? So those are 2 areas. And also, I think if you're aware that as part of your SEO strategy, you might have gone a bit hard on sort of keyword optimization and you've churned out a lot of content that's been focused around just delivering SEO traffic rather than customer value, then there's a bit of heuristic analysis that you can do there as well, just to say, look, is this content aiding in my customer finding what they want and going on to make a purchase?
Perfect. Thank you, mate. Hopefully that answers your question, Ben. If anybody else has got any questions, please feel free to raise your hands. I've got a couple that have been sent to me here. One of which is, how do we track that kind of channel performance when the user journeys are becoming so fragmented?
Yeah, so it's difficult as we're in I suppose, a post-cookie world. We can't track individuals anymore down to individual users and track them across platforms anymore. But with tools like GA4, we can start to use the modeling that they've got within those systems to restore some of the lost pathways. So they use, I think, 3 different signals. They do still use user ID, also device ID, but then they have a system called Google Signals, which between those 3 things, in particular, if the user's logged in, we can start to actually map and fill in some of the gaps that we've lost with consent mode as well within GA4. So on top of that, with some advanced sort of data-driven attribution, we can actually start to build up a bit of a picture of channel performance when there have been those multiple interactions. So it's more challenging, but we can still do it with some of the newer analytics platforms.
Great, thank you, mate. And a couple of others just coming through here. So Isabel from Barclays has asked, Google's obviously the dominant search engine in the UK. How is Bing evolving in regards to market share at the moment?
Yeah, so we have seen it increase, but it's small margins. I think there was a lot of hype around it when they obviously partnered with ChatGPT and incorporated ChatGPT into their search. But I think the reality is that that was kind of within the marketing world. And I think the reality is that sort of most of the public aren't really interacting with Bing still that much. So we have seen a bit of an increase in market share. In the US, it's a bit more prevalent. So I think they've got it's 10, 11%, something like that. So it's a little bit higher, but yeah, certainly in the UK, it's still very much dominated by Google.
Perfect. Thanks, James. There is a couple of other questions that I will forward on to you. We're going to pop on to Ben's talk up next. But if you guys do have any questions for James, his details will definitely be shared with all of you after this. Thank
Cool.
you, mate. Cheers.
Thanks very much. Cheers.